Welcome to another episode of Behind the Dreamers. I'm Jennifer Loading, and we are talking to the achievers, the creators, the magic makers, and the dreamers. These are our friends. These are your friends, and they are living the extraordinary. Well, here we are, another episode. Have another amazing guest coming on the show today. And just to give you guys a little teaser about him, he says how successful we are at anything we do in life will be determined by how well we learn to do that thing. Learning how to learn efficiently and without limits, therefore, is our most valuable self-improvement skill. Learning how to teach it to others is our most valuable leadership tool. He's a pioneer in translating research science to learning, superior achievement in the classroom, boardroom, and just about, I guess, everywhere, right? So we're going to welcome him on in just a few minutes. But before I do that, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. So today's episode is brought to you by Walt Mills Photography. If you are a creator needing post-production, consultation, or promotion, Walt Mills is your guy. Whether short films, YouTube films, photography work, or a new headshot, Walt can help you find a solution to match your needs. To learn more about him and his work, you want to go to photosbywalt.com. We also want to give a shout out to our friend Chris Clow of Upbeat Media Productions. If you are in need of turnkey special event production, Clow is your go-to. To learn more about him and his work, you want to go to upbeatmediapro.com. We got it out. All right. So my guest today, Gregg Goodhart, a recovering high school music teacher, found within teaching music the fundamental principles that allow for accelerated improvement, commonly referred to as talent. I'm excited to hear about this. His findings resulted from a serious interest and study of cognitive and behavioral neuroscience and psychology that teachers are not taught in teacher training programs. Using his teaching as a lab to experiment with these ideas, he developed unique expertise in explaining the elements needed to reach any level of success with any desired skill. So, Gregg, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here today.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks so much for having me. I've been actually really excited to talk to you.
Awesome.
If everyone doesn't know, we talked for about an hour and a half the first time we met.
I know.
So I think we're going to have some fun.
That happens sometimes, and that's what's fun about when we do these shows. You get good energy on the show. And so sometimes it's like almost I have to be like, okay, we got to land the plane. Like we have to stop the podcast at some point, right? Okay. So anyway, so what I want to do to open this up, I want to, because I said a lot of big things there in your bio and you're doing some cool stuff. I want you just to maybe give us kind of a little bit of a run through of how you're helping your clients. Like what are you doing with your clients right now?
So going back to that overall statement, which I really appreciate you starting with, how successful we are at anything in life, except for winning the lottery. But anything else will be determined by how well we learn to do that thing. But we do not value learning. We think teaching is just telling someone something you already know how to do. We think we respect teachers because they, put up with kids all day, not for their intellect and insight, which, sometimes maybe that's appropriate. But in general, the profession of teaching is a lot more difficult than you think. And we're not being taught these principles that can make anyone great at anything. So imagine, I guess, think of it this way. We're all out there. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's football or music or business. It doesn't matter. We're looking for talent, right? That we want a talented person, then we can come and we can put them on our football team, our sales team, our music ensemble, whatever it is, and they're going to grow and become better and better, already talented. They're going to be good and they're going to have great success. That's how we judge if someone will have success, if they have talent coming in or some sort of talent. And that is completely wrong, and we're wasting a lot of time and money trying to do that. Why not just take anybody at all, as long as they have the basic requisite skills. So you're not going to go into becoming a head football coach if all your life you've been, a classical guitarist and you have degrees in that. Okay, you're going to have, so sure, you have to have the basic qualifications, but there are thousands of people who want that job who have basic qualifications. I don't care if it's football or anything else. Why not develop those people to be the most talented people you've ever seen? And it is completely possible. This is related to that whole 10,000 hour thing. That's a misunderstanding. We can talk about that if you want. Let's talk about the real stuff, not the stuff that's in the news or the stuff we've come to believe, the real stuff. However, what we do take out of that, besides arguing about whether it's really 10,000 hours or not, which is a total straw man, besides that is holy moly, there's a way for people to do this. And the other thing about the 10,000 hour thing is it wasn't 9,999 hours and then it happened. It was they were head and shoulders above all their peers for the first 1,000, the second 1,000, the third 1,000. This is one of the reasons we believe the myth that you have to start as a child. Because the first 1,000 you do, you're going to be excellent compared to your peers if you're 10 or 15. Not if you start when you're 25, because even the people who aren't that good have been doing it the way most of us do it, which is work, study and pray. I hope I've got it. I hope I pass the test. No, there's a way to study and be sure. But you're going to be far ahead using that method for 15 years than someone using this method for 1 year. Or these men. So that's why people think you have to start young, because you have to be the head of your peer group. The point is all along the way. So you get that talented salesperson, you get that talented musician. They're raw, right? Raw, which just means their skills haven't been developed. By the way, always replace the word talent with skill when you use it. Please just use the word skill instead. Talent implies there's some magical gift ridden on a unicorn and talent is sprinkled by pixie dust on the person. That's not how it works. Use the word skill. It's a developable skill. So getting back to what I was just saying, you can take any of these people and they can do, so you're already going to have the qualifications. You're already going to be at ground level with whatever you're doing. Now, learn this way. I don't care who the person is. You know, when I first started doing this, I'm a recovering high school music teacher, right? And when I first started doing this, I naturally went within my field of expertise. The way I started to learn that I could do this with anybody or anything is when I started teaching instruments, I had no idea how to play. And I wasn't teaching them how to play. Their teachers were doing that. I was teaching them how to practice. This evolved into something that I ended up calling a practiclass, which is a type of master class. Go online and watch videos of me teaching saxophone and tuba and violin. I do not know how to play or teach these instruments. I'm a classical guitarist. That's what my degrees are in. That's when I realized this stuff was universal to everything. So I started branching out to different things. And I talked to my wife who's in the financial industry. And I just said, I know no one there is right now. I mean, some goofy high school music teacher is going to go for this. But she was talking to me about how hard it is to onboard people sometimes. And these are people in supporting roles, but important supporting roles, high-level broker support people and executive assistant types. And, you got to come in. They give you a couple weeks to learn, and you better not screw up. And she said, it takes 3 months to figure out if they're going to work out or not. Oh, my gosh, I could tell you in 3 weeks. And there's only one criteria. Will you follow directions? That's it. What they need to learn these things? Fine. Go home and do this. It's okay if you go home and do it wrong, because all I'm going to do is figure out, okay, let's work together. Oh, you misunderstood this direct. It's okay to fail 2 times. It's okay to fail 3 times, as long as the failure is, once we get it right, if you come in and fail again, you didn't do it. And I know you didn't do it, because this works 100% of the time. And it would be very easy to tell. And you end up with a conversation like, well, you could do this. You refuse to follow directions, so you're just not going to fit in here. I could tell you that in 3 weeks. And within the first 3 weeks, if they follow directions, they'll be farther along than anyone was in 3 weeks before. So there are ways this can apply to everything. It is the way life becomes better. I'll add one other thing. So when I teach music students, one contingent I end up with a lot are adult retirees who have made all their money, have retired early, and now they're going to play music. And I'm going to take all that time and effort I put into building those 3 businesses I sold, and Bill Gates bought one of them. I actually know someone like this who was studying with me, practicing. They were taking lessons with other people. I did the practicing part. And with all this talent, with all this ability to teach their people, with all this ability to take on new challenges and figure it out, they couldn't play their way out of a wet paper bag on their instrument. And then they get on stage and they fall apart, whether that's you in the meeting and trying to conduct it, all of a sudden you're nervous. Oh my gosh, 9 times out of 10, stage fright is not causing your freeze up. Your freeze up is causing your stage fright, and the stage fright is happening because of a lack of a rich mental model for the subject in which you are teaching or playing. And that's something that's totally buildable. And so I work with these people, right? And then they go to coffee houses. They're used to being in front of board meetings and sometimes hundreds of people. And then they go into the coffee house and make complete fools of themselves. And it's not their fault. No one's ever told them how to learn. They've just figured out what they need for their area. almost no one knows the generic principles and how to apply them anywhere. And so they learn, and I get them there and, oh my God, go watch my videos. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And we can do this stuff in real time. And what happens is all of a sudden they realize their true power. Imagine just going into music and finding out you're massively after a life in business, going into music and finding out you're massively talented. It's time to get up on stage, write music. And wouldn't that be great? Well, that's what we were doing. And I have a particular memory of one particular client, Texan, actually. She lives, I believe, outside Austin. And, Dallas, I'm sorry. And we finally got to the point where, sometimes it takes a few weeks. It always works, but we got at the point where everything started clicking together. She said, oh my gosh. And I said, do you know what you're feeling right there? That's not the joy of music. That is the joy of learning. That's what the brain gives you when you figure something out the right way, not through struggling and I barely understand it. When you really get it, the brain, it is the ultimate source of self-esteem, not phony first place trophies and pats on the back, learning how to learn. And she wrote me a little quote from my website and she says, it's not an exaggeration to say this is life-changing. It makes your life better. This is why people who have great lives and are super successful, this is what they're doing. Most of them just don't know how to articulate it and tell people exactly what it is. We go to them for advice. They're not giving you the advice you need. You don't need to know how they do things. You need to know how they did things. And they don't really know because they didn't spend time like a teacher would evaluating what works, what didn't work along the way. They just forget what didn't work, keep doing what works. And so that information is out there. So the broad answer to your question is it enriches life. If you can learn to do anything well that you want to do, it's just a matter of what do I want to do and how much time do I have? It's an interesting place to be in life.
Yeah, I like it. I like it, Gregg. And I think, I'm listening to everything that you're saying. And it's so funny because I coach clients and I work with them. And it's interesting because and this is why I've had so many mentors in my life, because part of that, trying to get your message across is how do you articulate that? Like they look at me and they go, okay, well, you're doing these great things in life. How did you do that? Right? What did you do? What did you do to get there? And how do we take that and say, okay, yeah, this is what I did, and articulate that to their people? And so I really like what you're talking about, the whole learning how to learn. And it's kind of like I had this conversation yesterday and we were talking about, when people want to lose weight or they want to scale their business, they go straight to the source and they go, well, tell me how to scale the business. Tell me how to lose weight. And they focus on this one piece, but that's not really how we achieve success, right? It's like you have to clean up the process. You have to make the process work so you get to the end result. And so what you're doing is kind of the process to get the result. That's what I'm hearing when you say this to me.
And that's what most people are missing. And when we talked, by the way, what you're talking about in the music world works like this. Person has a great performing career. They're playing all over the world. They get a professorship. It's a lot of people who have professors here. Those who can do, those who know how it's done, teach. Those who can do both well have mastered two separate but equally difficult skills. One isn't a consolation prize for the other. And most people can't do both extremely well. And when you go to a performer and say, how do you prepare for a performance? That is a good performer does not a good teacher make, and vice versa. It could, but you better study them both separately. And even the ones we think are good, our bar is really, really low because we don't know how learning works. So you don't want to ask, what do you do? You want to ask, what did you do?
It's good.
And they really don't know. In fact, I had written a blog about this, about how professional teachers and how we tend to take their advice. Well, and then we go to our teachers, we hear what they say. Well, I don't do this anymore. Like play your scales. Right. Well, sure, you can give that up 30 years in if you want, because you'll have other things that take the place of that type of exercise. And then the student goes to the teacher, so-and-so doesn't play their scales, but you tell me to play my scales. Are you better than so-and-so? That's not the right question to ask. Right. First, that's not the right question to ask the teacher. The question to ask the teacher, are you better than me? Know where I need to go tomorrow and next week? That's the first thing. But the second thing is what you ask the performer is not what you do now. You ask the performer, what did you do when you had exactly as many hours of practice and experience, more importantly, hours of deliberate practice, as I have right now? Most of them, unless they've studied teaching seriously, can't answer that. There was another blog I wrote And I call this "Do What They Did, Not What They Do." In fact, if I could I'd be happy to send it out because I took my blog down a long time ago. I'd be happy to send it out. Ask me for a copy, I'll send it. You can send it if there's. But it was about my two of my favorite musicians of all time, John Lennon and Paul McCartney. The reason I became a musician was the Beatles, and they had this big, cover in the airport in Denver when I was leaving from a conference, and it said the neuroscience of creativity, and they had a great picture of Lennon and McCartney. I said, like, how can I buy that, right? And I knew it was going to happen. A phenomenon I like to call getting it just right enough to get it wrong. Where this is this, and then you walk away with the total. This is replete in education and learning and mentoring. Replete, all over the place. Well, it looks like this, and it looks like this, and it looks like this, but your conclusion is wrong. So it was this long article about, and it was really nicely done in the first part where they analyzed, John is the rebel, and Paul was the button-up guy, and together they worked off each other, and they were talking about how they wrote certain songs, and I went into a particular story that I knew about one of their songs and put that in there. That's after they had played thousands of hours of gigs in Hamburg that most people don't talk about. It's after they had been all over the world absorbing different types of music with people at their feet everywhere they went, wanting to share ideas and music with them. Then, after all that training, that's going into the studio untrained the first time they weren't that good, and then going in again, and then having a producer with like George Martin who had classical training, who could score all this stuff. You're hearing, and what would most people do having read that article? I'll tell you what I would have done had I read it 30 years ago. I would have found someone with my opposite personality and who played an instrument, a similar, a rock and roll instrument, piano or drums or guitar, and sat down with them and said, let's compose. And nothing would have happened. And you wonder, I guess I just don't have talent. You don't want to ask how Lennon and McCartney did it on their first or third or fifth album. You want to ask how they did it when they met and they were the Nurk twins playing around Liverpool. That's and that's not what we asked. That whole big article, which, by the way, had nothing to do with the neuroscience of creativity. That was another article. It was just a clever deception. Media does this to us all the time. Clever deception that you're going to learn about the neuroscience of creativity from John and Paul. No, it was a separate article. It just happened to be above that in big print. And again, this creates something that researchers call neuromyth in teaching and learning, where we believe a lot of stuff that just ain't true. Using just 10% of your brain, give me a break. It's both. It's more and less depending on what you're doing. And I can describe some of those situations. But that's the thing. Do what they did, not what they do. And most of them don't know what they did in a didactic, pedagogical sense. Just throwing some stories at you ain't it. Teaching is a didactic. That means one piece by piece, which builds off each previous piece, knowing all the steps. That's what teaching is, and that's what learning is. And 9 times out of 10, if you're especially in the early stages, you are going to need a teacher if you really want to be successful, unless you want it to take 3 or 5 times as long. You'll get there eventually through trial and error.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is good. Thank you for all of that. No, I agree. I think too often people they get hung up on what are you doing right now to be successful rather than what did you do when you were in the beginning and you were sitting exactly where I'm at now. And the problem that I think too with that is I learned something with a mentor that I'm working with, and he was talking about, when we come into something, whatever that is, whether it's a business or a musical instrument, whatever we're going into, we have to take into account a lot of things. We have to take in our wisdom, how long we've been working at it. Like there's all these factors, but the problem is we go into this and think, well, I was successful here, so I should just be able to walk into the next thing and do the exact same thing. It doesn't work that way.
What an amazing insight. This is so great because this is something I talk about all the time and that comes up all the time. And it's an area of mystery for most people. Like, congratulations that you figured it out. I wouldn't say this. I especially wouldn't say this on a recording unless I really meant it. You must be a good teacher. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you. I work at it.
You must, because the stuff isn't obvious. You have to reflect and figure out and refine and all that. Because what you pointed out is you're pointing out in all kind of fields. Let me give you an example in music that we'll all understand. When adults come to the instrument and cannot figure out why they can't get good at it. And like I said, I work with some really, really successful people who you'd say that person could do anything. This idea, because you're smart in one thing, that you can be smart in anything is completely wrong. You have to relearn all new stuff. But if you know how it goes, you'll be a little faster. There is no such thing as transferable genius. Okay.
That's good.
You might know the process a little better and take a little less time. But if it's a 10,000 hour deal and you haven't studied it and you're a genius, maybe you get it in 9, but it's still going to take you a long time. So So anyway, we as adults, or even, I taught high school classical guitar, and it was a real class. You had to do the work or you didn't, get through it. And the same thing would happen, this type of thing. You take up a musical instrument and you go, well, I'm an adult. I've had a bunch of businesses, but even more, I don't know anything about construction, but I studied for 2 weeks and remodeled my bathroom. I did a good job. It's solid. Guy came by who was working on the toilet and said, wow, whoever did this is really good. Okay, because I studied and I did the work. Okay, I studied, and within 2 weeks, I made a professional bathroom. I tiled, I put in a sink, I did all this stuff. Okay, well, you know what? At the very minimum, you've had 12 years of instruction in mathematics, how to read, how to figure out words you don't know, history, learning things. Oh my gosh. And, they built a canal, but one side was too big. I remember that story from Egypt. That's how water flows in here. Okay, you have all of this education. You took manufacturing classes that you thought were no big deal, but they're in there. Okay, and then you go using your reading skill, high-level reading skill, using your ability to measure and understand fractions and understand multiplication and using your basic motor skills, which you've developed all your life. You play sports or you do the laundry or whatever it is. So now I have to hold a saw. Okay, it'll take me a little bit to figure that out. Or a power saw. I'll read about it. I'll try a little bit. Okay, and of course you learn to do something pretty complex because you already have pretty complex language skills, reading skills, history skills, measuring skills. Then you go to something, and we're just using music. This could be just about anything, like me starting a business. That would be a good example. Then you go to something like music. Completely new written language, completely new oral language, completely new physical skills, fine motor skills, which you likely haven't developed at all or very little, maybe writing and some other things. Okay, the human body is not meant to play an instrument. It's meant to swim, walk, run, jump. It's not meant to play a musical instrument. And you walk into this with nothing and expect to get it in the same time that you mastered doing a bathroom. And by the way, all you mastered was doing one bathroom. You are not ready to be a certified contractor. Right. So put this in. So this idea that people get, I should be just as good over here. And this gets into the area of mindset. Carol Dweck from Stanford's work, that then you start getting down on yourself. There must be something wrong with me, which then affects learning. You cannot learn, at least not learn the way it should work, if you're not doing it with somewhere around 95 to 100% focus. You cannot focus at that level unless you have some confidence what you're going to do might work. And when you start to see the evidence that you just don't have what it takes to make it work, your focus wanes, you do less and less, and you get away with it, and you fail. Failing does not mean you're a failure. Only stopping means you're a failure. Yeah. So you will get better. You need to understand that you are not a failure. You are learning. This is the way learning works. We could talk about Carol Dweck's mindset research and all that stuff if you want, but how, believing that a failure indicates you are a failure is the easiest way to fail.
Right.
And I'm not talking, do you want to talk a little bit about mindset?
Tell us what you got. Yeah, go for it. That's my wheelhouse, so go for it.
Okay. Well, first of all, so mindset is this. I'm going to be very general. Please read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. Carol Dweck, Stanford, over 30 years of research in this area. But it basically, among many other things, says if you get really bent out of shape because you make mistakes, and you are not going to want to accept the next challenge, which is the only way to get better at stuff.
Right.
It's a lot more complex than that, but we can start with that overview. And she finds different ways we get discouraged. Now, I will say, for those who've run across this term, say, in our education system, it has been watered down and misinterpreted into a feel-good trope, into a pat on the back. Here we go into the test, Johnny. Have a growth mindset. She identifies two types of mindset: a fixed, believing whatever abilities we have are those that we have, and we cannot get any better, maybe a little, but we can't change. And a growth mindset. Oh my gosh, through work, I can get anything I want. This has been misinterpreted to mean pat people on the back and tell them they have a growth mindset and have them be confident. And I even read a very good book about not mindset, but some other stuff talking about a school system. I was just looking at the quote earlier today. I had it out where outside of the state, when they did state testing, there was a big inspirational board about we have growth mindsets. We have no fear. We're going into the test. oh my gosh, you don't do a growth mindset right before you walk into a test. It won't work. A growth mindset isn't phony encouragement the way it's being used in most schools. A growth mindset is belief in the process because of the evidence you've experienced that it works.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference. It's not a phony encouragement. Let's all feel good. And not everyone, lots of people, the mainstream have interpreted it that way and have totally watered down Carol's work, which is interesting because that's related to a scientific backlash. That it's caused a certain kind of scientific backlash. But that's not the case at all. If there's two ways to do a growth mindset. One is you get people to do something they could never do before in a short period of time. For me, it's teaching people. My music side is teaching people how to, they play a concert, they screw everything up, they worked on it for 3 months, and then I fix all that stuff up in 20 minutes. And they're like, oh my gosh. What I do for people in academics, and we're talking a soft skill, hard skill like playing a guitar, motor skills, soft skill, cognitive. So when I say academics, that applies to anything that requires thought. What I do there is I just use a really simple process called dual coding to get them to memorize a whole bunch of numbers that they could never memorize on their own. And then I start combining things with that. So you can memorize. And by the way, the seat of learning is memorization. Memorization. You put memorization first, which almost nobody does. You put memorization first, and there's ways to remember succinctly and quickly as much information and as detailed as you want, and never, ever forget it, ever, if you don't want to. It's just the exercises, while taking much less time than the way we normally do memory, are unpleasant and require effort.
Sure.
Of course, the real truth here is if you put the effort in for a day or 2 or 3 or a week, it gets easier. And then it's no big deal. Kind of like learning to tie your shoes when you're a kid. It's a real bear and you whine and cry, but then now it's nothing. So that's what mindset is. This idea that we can do it because we know we can. And you start with little teeny victories. You show you can. And if you can see the here to here, right? Here to here. Okay. 2 + 2 is 4, Johnny. Do you understand? No, I don't. Teach. I understand. I see 2 + 2 is 4. It's exactly the same gap as Einstein before the theory of relativity. It's the same leap. Every leap is the same. Okay. You go and you find where you're at and you add to that. And then you add. But too many people want to do this first. Right. Which you brought that up earlier. I want to perform. I should be at performing level. Sorry, humble yourself, have a beginner's mind. You say, but that'll make it so much slower. I already know most of the stuff. Great. Then the stuff that you already know, guess what? It's going to go by in 5 seconds. The worst thing you're going to do is waste a day, a week, 2 weeks. Otherwise, you're going to quit in a month anyway.
Yep. It's cleaning up the process. And this is exactly what I talk about with everything I do, because people come to me for these specific things that they want to fix. And they're not looking at all the things that line up to the piece, all the things that need to be in place, because they think it should be easy like everything else they've done. So I'm with you on all of this. I do want to talk about, because you have a book you're writing right now, right? Like another book coming together here? Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's coming together great. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And I'm assuming it's going to be based, is this more science or more work? I mean, more based on what you're doing right now, or is there more stuff coming up in this?
So
you don't have to tell us everything. You don't have to spill everything. I said, you don't have to tell us everything.
It's funny. No, it's great because I got a lot of great advice. What really pushed me into writing this book was so many people telling me I should. And so many people who are like, real academic, have a position in college, who discovered my work saying, you have to write a book. And I kept trying to focus in on what I want to do. Now I've already written one for music instruction. It's, and a supplement on how to deal with stage fright. And I've got a bunch of, but yes, I need to get out and do the general stuff now. Frankly, the first couple of years I was doing this, I knew I wanted to write a book, but I wasn't going to bother because I couldn't do better than the wonderful, all-time great book. If you read one book the rest of your life, other than the book of your religion, it should be Talent is Overrated by Jeff Colvin. Okay. It is amazing. I can't believe how many answers that guy figured out before some of the science was done yet. This is a 2007 book. It's an amazing work. And I said, why would I want to do more? And by the way, it's a business book. I was a music department chair at the time, and I brought it in and I told them, you should read this. And I can't make them do anything. And I remember my choir teacher, her husband, asked, what are you doing with a business book? She's like, Greg wants me to read it. And then several months later, she meant to get to it. Several months later, I'm walking in at 8 a.m. in my classroom, and she comes up to me. I said, you read it. Oh my gosh, yes, I did. I wish I did. But it's a business book, oddly enough, and it did more for my music instruction and teaching people than anything up until that time, though I was ready for it. I had been studying teaching on my own for a long time. So anyway, I realize now I can add to that, and there's more. I spent a lot of time doing the work. So I got encouraged to, people said, why don't you write a general thing? And I started taking a look at some of the books that are out there. Talking, I don't want to say any names, but I've read a lot of them. And what they really are everyone's personal journey. Wow, I know super learning. Here's how I did it. I can do super focus. I write a book called Focused Work. And here's how you do it. And that's not a problem. That's fine. Two things. These are not scientific conclusions. Right. So they may have worked for them for any number of reasons. You could have all sorts of previous training you're unaware of and previous experience. They may or may not work for some. And most of the time, these people are pretty honest. This may or may not work for you. But the second thing is these are the implementations. If stuff, learning works one way. There ain't another way. It works one way. Okay. How close you get to that way is how well you learn. So anything you've learned that works really well for super learning and for all this other stuff, you are using the principles described in cognitive science. Problem is the literature out there now, and I've read a lot, and maybe there's others, except stuff like Talent is Overrated and teaching books like Make It Stick, which don't have everything. The problem is they're giving you the end result, how they did it. They're giving you a fish instead of telling you the underlying things so you can figure it out for yourself, teaching you to fish. It's because they don't know any better. They don't know the underlying stuff. Sometimes you read these books and you can tell these guys spent a month looking up cognitive science stuff to justify what they already knew, which is great. I'm glad they found that. And I'm sure if they found some proof that said they were wrong, they would be honest and change their ways. Most people, I would hope, would do that. But that's not going to give you the truth. The truth is digging and reading everything. The truth, you find it by searching for it, even if you don't like what you find. And I can't tell you how many times along the way I was contradicted. But I said, there's no way that's true. And then I'd read and go, I have to try it. And it would hurt my pride, but it made me better. Yeah. Seek truth, whether you like what you find. As a 20th century author who is, I forget her name, but she's got a great quote. The truth does not change with our ability to stomach it. If you'll do this, you'll figure out how stuff works. And I realize there's a gap there. There's no one telling, this is how it works. And once you start to know how it works, like I read these books, I'm like, oh, that's mindset. Oh, that's contextual interference. Right. That's interleaving. That's spacing. Oh, well, and it's an incomplete understanding. So what you're getting are the end products. Right. Here's how you do it. It's kind of like saying, here's how you milk a cow. Well, do you know how to birth a cow? because it's the process. Right. And you have to go way right. The underlying process, as you were saying, what you're doing, by the way, awesome, great teaching tool. I call it meeting them where they're at. Do you know this? No. Do you know this? No. Do you know this? No. Do you know how to spell your name? Yeah. Okay. We're going to go from there. Right, I mean, it's frustrating for a teacher, though the more you do it, the easier it gets. Sure. But you got to go all the way. And that's frustrating for the student. Yeah. You're going to have to learn how to, spell your name first. Sorry. You can't do these other things. You can't do algebra without knowing how to do addition. I'm sorry. You just can't. And that's what I'm going to be writing about, so that you don't just use tips and tricks from other people. This is worse in music, by the way, but tips and tricks, the principles. So you of course give tips and tricks, but the principles so that you can change them and they're malleable and you can come up with your own ideas. Because that's how I came up with all this stuff, experimenting using the basic ideas.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking about, this is what I feel like when somebody says they want to get an exercise plan, but they can't get up at the same time every day. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, they can't set a schedule to get up and go to bed so they can get their body regulated, but they want to work on their health. That's what I'm thinking when you tell me this. It's like they got to clean up these processes from the basic ground up in order to get to where they want to do on these bigger level things. So we're speaking this. I feel like we're speaking the same stuff, maybe different terminology, but the same kinds of things. I love this. So I wanted to ask you another question, because I know we talked a lot about all this mindset and the science and all this stuff here, but I want to also ask you, because obviously this podcast is about the story and the journey and what led you here and inspiration, all the things that you're doing. what I want to know is coming from being a teacher, moving into this entrepreneur space, because now you're going from employee to now I'm a self-employed kind of person, different ball game. And as we're talking about all these little things you had over here and you have to relearn here, right? And it's the same thing when I came from I was in the network marketing space for 22 years. And then I decided to get out of that and go form my own LLC, get on my own. And I got frustrated in the beginning because I was like, I've been doing that for 23 years. I know how to do that. 22, 23 years. I know how to do it. Now I'm over here going, I have to do things completely different. I got to relearn things, right? So what I want to know from you was what was maybe a tricky thing you had to navigate coming from that space to this new space?
The trickiest thing in the world, a major crisis in my life where I believed I had lost my career. And the options based on my training and experience were quite unattractive. I had put all my eggs in one basket and thinking that was my lifelong thing. And the only other option that looked good to me, well, it needs a little background. So I had been a very did my best to be a very insightful teacher. I took teaching very, very seriously. I'd go home and think about what I did and then look stuff up. I didn't get into the science until a good 10 years into teaching high school. And I had been teaching for a good 10 years before that at different locations and different things. But I was always very curious. When I first got my first job as a music store guitar teacher, I started reading a lot. I was already in music school, but I started reading a lot. I felt really bad about taking people's money if I didn't know how to teach. And I thought I should be good at it. And so I was just really putting in, we talk about these people, authors who talk about coming up with the tips and tricks. That's what I was coming up with. I was figuring out tips and tricks and everything. And I was one of those for a long time. And I started figuring all this stuff out, knew nothing about the cognitive science, thought I knew a thing or two, but I didn't. And mostly I would figure out things that work. This is great. Everyone's going to do this. And this is great. Not knowing how it worked, they'd lose their effectiveness, wouldn't work as well. It's amazing what knowing. And then in my 10th year, oddly enough, 10 years, right? 10,000 hours. And I was doing, I was grading people by like video, like I'd have people perform and I go through measure by measure. Like you learn by doing stuff like that. But it takes a lot more time. You have to be very dedicated to do it. I wasn't dedicated. I was just curious and I wanted to do a good job. Then in 2010, I read Talent is Overrated and my mind blew. I still remember where I was during certain parts of that book. My mind being like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's what I used to think was, In fact, it was so different to me that when in the beginning he brought up the term deliberate practice, which is the focus of the whole book, though he talks about many of the other things, I almost stopped reading it. I'm a musician. Pride right away. I'm a music teacher. I'm an accomplished award-winning music teacher, and I have a master's degree in music. I've never heard of deliberate practice. You just practice. Yeah, that was me. About 15 years ago. And I almost stopped reading it. Well, of course, I'm glad I did. It blew my mind. Now I had something. So I started using it to teach. I started developing things and I got good at it. Right before the crisis, I got up the nerve. I had done some conferences in my very small field of guitar instruction, some national conferences. Not a big deal. It's very small. But then I decided I was going to go to an American String Teachers Association conference. That's a big one. And, flew all the way out to Providence. And I was going to start talking about these ideas. I had put it together. Oddly enough, the skeleton of what I made is still the skeleton of my presentation today, even though many things around it have changed. Yeah. I wrote it in a cigar bar in Providence, Rhode Island. I did not smoke a cigar and did not want one. I couldn't sleep. And it was the only place I could go that was still open to hang out and try to write this thing. So I was very meek. I had a Saturday morning presentation. I said, I talk very fast and I can be very loud. I have ADHD and I'm just very excited about this stuff. See, I tend to geek out on things and think they're way cooler than they are. Other people don't think they're as cool as I do sometimes. And I said, and I knew I'm probably just geeking out on this. This seems like the most important thing I've ever discovered. And just please bear with me. And so I gave them my presentation and everyone starts coming up to me going, oh my gosh, how did you do that? You need to get out on the road and go. I'm like, I'm right. It is that good. Then the crisis happened a couple of months later. Okay, and I'll save you the details, but based on my qualifications, my training, certifications I do and do not have, and the level of earning I had worked up to at that time, there wasn't anything close to an attractive alternative. Maybe a couple of years of graduate school to go back to learning things I already knew so that I could be certified and qualify myself to go start at the bottom of where I had just worked up to the top. No. And the options, that sounds bad. The options were actually worse. And I knew, so I need to get out and tell people about this. I think I could build a little career speaking and consulting with, high schools and elementary schools and how they could do their programs. The truth is, there's no way I would have been able to accomplish that having my other career going on. I thought that that would be my platform. I'm this teacher guy and I can go. There's no way. The only way it would possibly happen, and I never would have done it on my own because it would have been a dumb decision to cut off all that in my life and then try. But I was forced into it. And I thought back to that presentation. I said, I've got something here. I've got something big here. And my clients this is right around when I realized I could teach any instrument, but hadn't done it yet. I've done it a billion times since then. And I've told you a million times not to exaggerate. But I knew I could do it. And I said, my potential client base, sorry if I don't use right business terms, I'm not good at it. I haven't studied it properly. My potential client base is every English-speaking music student in the entire world. Everyone, with the exception of the super talented. So the 0.05%. Everybody else needs me. And so I started doing that. And 6 years later, I was an overnight success.
Wow. Good for you. Incredible. Sometimes these things happen. I think I would say, I use the terminology, get pinned against the wall, right? And you have to make that decision to move. And that's kind of like what happened with me when I was coming out of the network marketing and moving into my coaching. COVID sort of hit. And all of a sudden it was like, I need to regroup and kind of think what I want to do. So, I think it's great that you've been able to take, whatever that is that you love doing, that passion. You were able to, our paths are not linear, right? I feel like all these things come into our lives and they sort of kind of mold us and create us and navigate us into where we need to be. And so I feel like you were in the space you needed to be to get into this next phase of where you're going. So I want to say to you, congratulations to be able to do that, because I can tell you're passionate about it. And I think that is so important, is being passionate about what you're doing. And I'm excited to, hear when your book, you get everything finalized on that. I think it's going to be great. Glad you're pursuing that, because I think that's it's good to do things like that. If you've got some stuff you need to get it out into the open, right?
Yeah.
I do want to ask you one final.
Be created, by the way. Go ahead.
Oh, no, good. I was going to ask you one more question before we wrap this up. If our audience wants to get in touch with you, because you said a lot of great stuff here, like I know you've got a lot in there. I can just tell there's a lot there. So if my audience or listeners want to get in touch with you, learn a little bit more about what you've got going on, what you're doing, your book, all of that, where do we want to send them?
Gregg Goodhart.
Okay.
GreggGoodhart. I have so many names, G's in my name, that someone else is
missing. Have a lot of G's. You have a lot.
I know. Yes. My mom says it's because I'm special.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, she only knew how special. So GreggGoodhart.com/new, NEW, and I will send you the link.
Perfect. And we'll make sure too, Gregg, when this goes out, we'll make sure that website gets in there so that they can connect with you if they want to get more information and stuff. So keep doing your thing. You're doing great stuff, and keep inspiring and helping your people learn, because yes, they need it. I agree with you. I think so many people are just not. They need you
too. Good teachers are too few and far between.
Yes, they are. And I think they need a dose of practicality. That's what I like to say. They need the realism that you're not just going to learn something overnight like that until you do the right systems. When you get things right, then you can learn. And if you're trying to do all these other things, learn a new widget, all these other things, you're wasting your energy. Got to get the basics.
The brain can only focus on one thing at a time. That's neuroscience. That is a law of neuroscience. Multitasking means switching, which takes longer. The brain can only focus on one thing at a time. Then it collapses that thing into a small part of the brain where it becomes automatized. Then you can, so that's running. Then you can add dribbling the basketball to it. Then you can add, right. Yeah.
Awesome, Gregg. Well, you are awesome. I want to say thank you for coming on here and sharing your story and talking about all your great stuff. It was so fun listening to you. I'm just going to let you keep going because you got so much good stuff there, but we do got to wrap the show up at some point.
It was more fun for me. It was
Exactly.
more fun for me. Thank you. It was
Good.
great to talk to you, Jennifer.
Good. All right. We do want to say to our audience, of course, if you enjoy our show, please be sure you give us a rating on iTunes. Go check us out on Facebook. And then, of course, hit the subscribe button on YouTube so we can keep sharing these amazing stories. And I do want to leave you guys with a final parting thought. In order to live the extraordinary, you must start, and every start begins with a decision. You guys take care, be safe, be kind to one another. We will see you next time.